Yeah, yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was great. Honored to be part of that.
Yeah, just getting to have all the conversations about your next project. That's so fun. Okay, Strawn,
Yep.
Strahan Coleman, you're back, and today we are hanging out and talking to moms, working moms. But I'm just really excited. We talked before we hit record that our last conversation was so meaningful to me because you talked from just like a really vulnerable space of your journey, and we were in the middle of our son's season of depression, and that has just been something that shaped my mothering. And I just love how you are so like you are a deep thinker and you pull us deeper, and I'm just so thankful for that. And I got to tell you that before we hit record, but I want to tell you that publicly on the
Oh,
record. Thank
thank
you for
you.
your work.
Oh, means a lot. Appreciate that. It's great to be back with you again.
Yeah. Okay, give us the quick rundown again. Remind us who you are, what you do, and let's just chat today.
Yes, well, kia ora everybody. I'm Strawn. I hail from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Hobbiton, land of the free,
Yeah.
God's own, actually, they call it. And I live by the beach in the Coromandel, which, if you can imagine, crystal water, you know, native bush lined cliffs, surf beaches, white sand. I live there with my three sons. I have three boys. My eldest is about to turn 12, and then my other two are 9 and 5. I am a musician by trade, so I've done music for the last sort of 15 years, but in this kind of last 5 years since COVID and beyond, I've been writing. So I spend a lot of my time writing and teaching on prayer and helping people to navigate the vast, confusing, disorienting geography of knowing God in life and our day to day and what it actually means to know Him. And I love that. So when I'm not doing that, I'm drinking single origin black filter coffee, which is my third love of life. And I'm looking forward to having another one this morning. So that says a lot about me in and of itself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you are a songwriter first and foremost, but then like you said, you transitioned to writing, which is still songwriting. I mean,
Mm.
I think of
Mm.
you a lot. Like the way you write is so beautiful, so poetic, so lyrical. It reminds me a lot of David. Not to like, just like I don't know, give you all the pats on the back, but it is
Yeah.
like that to me. And so, how has your writing like what when you're writing, how have you transitioned from one to the other? Like, what does that feel like?
I appreciate that question. Yeah, because I think when I first started writing, I was like, man, I'm gonna have to learn how to write. Like I got no idea how to
Yeah,
write.
yeah.
And but the writing was really I lost my ability to sing about some years ago, and it's sort of ebbed and flowed out. But generally, haven't been able to sing for about 4 years.
Mm.
And I think I started writing a book because I just needed to kind of process and
Yeah.
experience and experiment. Um, but I think that in the end, what I realized is that because I started writing songs when I was 8, I used to write these little lyric sheets, and all through my teens, I wrote. It was just a way that I'd process my feelings and my experience of the world. So I actually found that if I sat down and tried to write something beautiful, that for me was how it framed my writing experience. Because I do write sort of like nonfiction, but I don't feel like I've got a lot to say. I don't feel like I've got anything new to say. Do you know what I mean? There are so many books
Yeah.
out there, and my opinion is like, look, go read something else. But so I sat down and I thought, if I wanted to invite people into an experience of God through words and to make something beautiful, that made sense to me because that's what a song is. And so I've tried to kind of take that heart of songwriting and just do what I enjoy, which is continue to invite people into experiences. And way more challenging with a book than a song. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Songs are way more emotive. They don't even need to make sense. Someone
True.
gets to the end of chapter one in a book and it doesn't make sense. That it's game over. But I've really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, well, and I mean, it's longer form, obviously, but it's also like there has to be, like you said, a beginning, middle, and end. It has to kind of be encapsulated, and like at the end, it's like, did you get it? And at the
Yeah.
music, it can be so many different things that make you feel. I mean, a song can
Mm.
change a feeling 100 different times.
It can. And
Yeah.
actually, at the end of the day, no one asks of a song, did that song really teach me anything? I think what
Hmm.
we ask of a song is, did that song make me feel something?
Yeah.
And I do think, like we can approach learning in a really heady way. Like I need to understand something before I can experience it. But I think as humans, we don't live that way in any other way. You know what I mean? We understand people by experiencing people. We
Mm-hmm.
understand, a good glass of wine or a nice meal by experiencing it, not by understanding the sort of nutrient value and mechanics of it. And I think, I hope that I wonder what I'm trying to do is course correct that with my writing, is say, what if we can do both? What if we can both experience what we're trying to understand whilst also making sense of it? And it's ridiculously ambitious, but that says a lot about me.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Okay, so what is something that you've experienced lately that's taught you something?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Um, Man, so much. I think one of the things that has been probably the biggest experience for me this year has been the sort of experience of a relationship with one of my kids, one of my
Mm,
sons. He when he was born traumatically and in and out of hospital for a bit, and then in the years when he was kind of in his greatest formation, his first 4 years, I was incredibly sick, like
mm-hmm.
just bedridden most of the time. We had no money. It was an anxious
Yeah,
environment for a young child. And so as he's got older, he's had to really work that through, and that's been hard for him. I think there's just a degree of nervous system reset that he needs.
yeah,
Anyway, so we've been trying to figure this out. He's 9 now. We've been trying to figure it out for years, trying every parenting hack in the book, and none of it's worked. It's just we kind of got to a point maybe about 7 or 8 months ago where I was just like hopeless about it, and I prayed, and I just was praying and praying about it, and I felt God say, just hug him, just cuddle him. And so I, about 7 months ago, started to, every time he was getting anxious, instead of trying to solve the issue or talk to him about it or make sense of it, I'd simply just get down on my knees, wrap my arms around him, and say, let's just cuddle for a while. And we'd sit on the couch and we'd cuddle for maybe 10 minutes, and he would just slowly calm down and reset. And I'd say, okay, man, like, what's going on for you? And it's funny because at first he never used to like touch. He would never cuddle me.
yeah,
And so it took a couple of months for him to learn to receive that sort of embrace. But now it's just we cuddle all the time, and it's completely opened up our relationship, and it's made a humongous difference to his openness. He's way more calm, he's less anxious. So I think for me, maybe the lesson in that was he needed an experience of safety and of calmness that was
yeah,
physical. And I could, I'd practice talking quietly and all those things. But this was like extreme, wrapping my arms around him
yeah,
and hugging him. And I just thought that said a lot about human nature and
yeah,
our deep need to be embraced, and the power of nonverbal communication and of love. So, bit of a long-winded story, sorry, but that's something. If
no,
I'm thinking about experience that's taught me, that's one thing.
yeah. I love that so much, and I think it's having big kids. Mine are a little bit older than yours, but I know that
Mm,
there will be a moment where that he probably like comes to you first, like before you realize it. He's just going to be like leaning in and expecting your embrace, and I
mm,
can't help but see that as us to the Father, right? Like there's so
yeah,
many times where I'm like, I'll just like struggle through this and get to it, but then there's like that surrender of like, I just need to lean in. I just can't do it anymore.
yeah, and isn't it funny how we fight that? Do you know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
often, I think subconsciously, a lot of us approach God really in that heady space. I need to understand. I need a word. I
Yeah.
need to tell. And I don't know if we've really been taught how to just let God embrace us, how to
Mm,
actually sort of what that means in our prayer and our communion with Him, to feel like that it's possible for God to wrap His arms around us when we are at our most difficult moments and
yeah.
to love us. And yet, that is fundamentally what we believe about human relationships as a necessity. And I think it speaks beautifully to the power of prayer and what we could mean when we say the word prayer.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Okay. Beholding was the book that we talked about last time you were here, about prayer, about just like going deeper in a relationship with God. And
Mm,
now you have thirsting, which is quenching
mm,
our soul's deepest desire. So
mm.
how did these books pair together? how did you write about thirsting? Like tell us,
Mm,
just like give us the glimpse, and then we're gonna go like as deep as we can, and then
yeah.
encourage people to experience by reading.
So, well, beholding was, I always kind of in my mind imagine beholding as moving from a working relationship with God to a friendship.
Right.
And thirsting is sort of a follow up to that in inviting people deeper than friendship into
Yeah.
a sort of intimate soul to spirit union with him that is very vulnerable and very open. But I realized that to get to that place of like letting God deeper into our biggest insecurities, our greatest fears and anxieties, I had to talk about desire and what desire is. And so thirst is kind of my word for that. Because desire sounds really safe and lovely, but
Yeah.
thirst sounds like vital and primal, and
Yeah.
I think that's more the human experience for me is like my desire, the real bottom, the stuff that I deeply desire. It can be painful, like it can
Yeah.
be like a wildfire, and so I wanted to kind of write a book that said, where does that fire come from? It comes from God. God is the first one to have this thirst. St.
Yeah.
Augustine said God thirsts that we would thirst for him. And if we see that God thirsts for us, then prayer and the gospel actually becomes about us learning to open up to God's love and to receive that desire. And so I kind of in the book slowly take people on a journey of opening up in deeper and deeper ways because I think that we just can't experience, we will experience God to the depth we let him in. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of us are afraid to really let him in. Do you know what I mean? Like right into those
Yeah.
vulnerable spaces. So my hope was that moving from beholding, which was about going from a working relationship to a friendship, this is about going deeper into that sort of intimacy and prayer.
Yeah, where do you feel like we lack that? Like, I mean, I can see where we lack that in general, but like as Christians, like one, I think the working to friendship is a huge thing. And I think especially as a
Yeah.
lot of our peers have deconstructed or as more and more popular within the church, especially just in our generation, we see that. But it also like I think that's where I've always kind of differed in my own faith, where it was like I always craved a friendship with the Lord. Like that's kind of how I
Yeah.
felt safest, was like this friendship
Yeah.
with him, and this like the rock of like my refuge, like my like he was like
Yeah.
my safety. And that friendship was
Mm.
safe to me. And so then sometimes that friendship is safe, and
Mm.
we don't have to tell our friends everything, right? Like in a friendship
Mm.
we have boundaries, or we have like I'll keep that for me. But then when we look at a friendship with the Lord, it's deeper than that. Like you're saying, like it's like
Yeah.
this craving that we have, yet we also are so fearful to go so vulnerable
Yeah.
and bear our souls, even with the one who created us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that is that we have a bad image of God in our
Yeah.
minds. When we really get into that vulnerability space, it matters who we believe God is. And I think we can say at church and we can say theologically, God is love and unconditional love, and He's so gracious and kind and merciful. We can say that out of our heads. But at the end of the day, when we feel shame, when we feel ashamed of ourselves or we're afraid, if we turn to anywhere other than God, it's a sign that we don't really think that he's fully
Yeah.
loving and kind and
Yeah.
patient. And I think a lot of people are more likely to turn to a therapy session than to God. They're going to see their
Yeah.
therapist as more understanding and more gracious than
Yeah.
God. And I think therapy is great. Like I'm not anti-therapy, but
No.
I feel like if we're more likely to go to a friend and treat them as an understanding person than God, then it's our image of God that is
Mm.
the struggle. But I think too we have to admit, like, we are insecure people. Every
Yeah.
human being at the
Yeah.
bottom of us is freaking out.
Yeah.
Am I lovable? What do I do with this shame? How do
Yeah.
I settle with this ickiness in me that I can't seem to change this behavior or this anger or this hatred or this lust or this vitriol or this jealousy or whatever? And I think sometimes we just don't admit to ourselves that really at the bottom of us, we're freaking out. So I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think we have to learn what it means to, first of all, acknowledge our vulnerabilities.
Hmm.
And then B, we really have to work on who we believe God is. In my most shameful moments, is God truly kind or is he
Mm.
ready to judge me? Um, and how do I have a relationship with him in that space? And a lot of people
Yeah.
don't consciously think that through, and I don't know if the church has always had
Yeah.
language for it.
Yeah. I think it's like because we can see him like that physical, like we can imagine him in like whatever physical form we can put to him. But how do we change that image? Like how do we get to
Mm,
the bottom of that in our own? Because that's something that's like even as a parent, like I can't change how my kids view God. I can change how I
yeah.
speak about God, so that they have a different image in their head, that it's not like this overbearing overlord that's like shaming
Yeah.
them, but like
Yeah.
I can speak about him as a friend, as a caring father. I can speak about him
Mm,
differently, but it's something only I can change for myself. So where do we even start to like to change that?
mm. Well, it has to be experience. The
Yeah.
story I told about my son is
Yeah.
is the story of how we move from one to the other, in the sense that
Yeah.
here's a boy, he's anxious, his nervous system has been set by the
Yeah.
fallenness and the brokenness of the world. And he's afraid to let me in. He's afraid to let me hug him. He's afraid to open up. He's
Mm.
afraid to express his feelings. So what does he need? He just needs a continuous, constant, day in, day out
Yeah.
experience of me holding him, showing him his emotions aren't too scary, they're not too
Yeah.
big, saying it's okay. I love you in these emotions. I love you in your anger. I love you in your out of controlness. That's what we need to do with God. We have
Mm.
to learn to take all of these feelings, all of this angst and this vulnerability and this longing, honestly to God, and actually
Yeah.
give him the chance to embrace us. And that has to be an experience of prayer. That has to be just as simple as saying, God, you can see me right now. This is what I often say to God. I'm like, I can't hide from you. You see
Yeah.
this. I
Yeah.
am stewing in insecurity right now. Like I just want to watch Netflix and eat 5 bars of chocolate
Yeah.
and just go into sugar comatose at midnight or something. You can see this. Will you just be here with me? Help me
Mm.
to experience your kindness.
Yeah.
I set my mind on who God says he is. The Lord, gracious and compassionate, abounding in steadfast love and slow to anger.
Yeah.
And I allow that to really sit in me and embrace me. And I think it's that simple. And I do that 10 times a day, 20 times a
Yeah.
day, every week, year on year on year. And hopefully by the time I'm 80, this embrace would have actually reset my disordered nervous
Yeah.
system and thinking. And I'll finally understand the goodness of God. But it has
Yeah.
to it has to come from that experience.
Mm. That's so good. And it's allowing that experience, right? It's not because there's
Yeah.
times where I'm like, I love a good cry. Like it
Yeah.
feels very cleansing, right? And so it's
Yeah.
it's allowing that good cry, but also to be like, hey, will you sit with me during this cry? Like, will you
Yeah.
like can I fall apart with you and not like by myself? Like and
Mm.
I love that verse where it's like, so often I lean on the verse that is like when there are no words, the Holy Spirit intercedes for us. So that's often where I'm
Yes.
like crying, where it's like I have no words. So like so if we can be together here and you can pray for me and I can just cry, that's where I'd like to sit now.
I love that because I think a lot of people see silence as absence. I think that's sort of
Mm,
our enlightened scientific mindset. So silence is absence. But, I've had a lot of experiences just in ministry of sitting with people in grief. And no doubt
yeah.
you have too, because
Yeah.
you're a human being. And,
Right.
and one of the worst things you can do when someone's grieving is just try and answer, be like, you know what, this is why this has happened and it's all going to be okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's so
Yeah.
trivial.
Yeah.
What you do with someone who's in real grief is you just sit in the
Yeah.
awkward, horrible, heavy emotions of it, and they feel loved that you're
Yeah.
just there. And I think that is another beautiful image of prayer. That when we are feeling these things, I love what you're saying. It's just like groan in my groans, weep
Yeah.
in with my tears, be with me. And we can do that in the busyness of all of our household stuff and of work, on the car, and the commute home. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't have to go sit under a tree for an hour. It's simply whenever we feel these emotions, like realizing that God's Spirit is in us, feeling those emotions with us,
Yeah.
feeling that grief. Like you say, the Spirit is interceding with groans beyond understanding
Yeah.
in Romans, and just saying, let's do this together. And it sounds so trivial. And
Yeah.
yet it is the place where intimacy is built. And I mean, if you think of the most intimate relationship in marriage,
Yeah.
where is the place of intimacy is built? It's when you're fully naked, fully
Yeah.
seen, and fully accepted. And that's why it's only
Yeah.
reserved for marriage, because it's the most vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect image from prayer. I want to be fully spiritually and emotionally naked before God, fully accepted and fully
Mm.
loved. And it's just learning to keep coming back to that.
Yeah. Oh, and sometimes I mean, like to keep coming back to that, like in the spiritual sense, where it's like I'm fully seen, no matter what. Like we believe that, like no matter what, we are fully seen. And so to come
Mm,
back and be like, hey, I know you saw that, and you see like the depths of it all.
yeah,
Can we get past this?
yeah,
Sometimes, and marriage is the same way. It's like I know you love me so much, and and my anger took over, or in my
yeah.
like the ugliness of my heart, where I can be like the meanest to you because I know that you are always going to be there. Like, can we
Mm,
can we move past this now?
yeah, yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
love what you wrote here. It says, let me click over. Um, you thirst because you are thirsted for. And I think that
Mm,
that is such a beautiful thing because we crave, as humans, we crave an intimacy, one with other people, but two with the one who created us. And that's
yeah.
because we are thirsted for by him as well. So what does that look
Mm,
like? What, like, tell me more about that, because I read that and I was like, oh man, I
mm.
love that.
Well, I was reflecting on when I was reflecting on desire, this thirst, because for me,
Yeah.
it's like it came out of a time of chronic sickness where I was thinking, you know what? Just because I'm sick doesn't mean I don't want to play with my kids, have a healthy
Yeah.
marriage,
Yeah.
travel. And it really annoyed me. I was like, how do I turn this thing off?
Yeah.
And then I got angry with God. I was like, why make me so passionate and so ambitious and so excited about life
Yeah.
and then shut me down? And the response that I got was, Strawn, you got no idea. You think you're passionate. You think you have
Mm.
desires and longings. You haven't even tasted the depth and ferocity of mine. And that really confronted me. And I thought, I don't know if I've ever imagined God as more passionate for intimacy and adventure and excitement and joy and happiness than me. And that's sort of where I started. And then I thought, what if this longing that we have that you're talking about is an image of God?
Yeah.
This deep, ravenous thirst for relationship. And so I thought, well, okay, well, I looked at God and I saw that God is actually a community of inness. To
Mm.
get a bit into a bit of high Trinitarian theology, it's Father,
Yeah.
Son, and Holy Spirit continually filling one another. And then I thought, is that what God intends for me? Am
Mm.
I meant to experience this complete infilling and saturation of God giving all of Himself to me, 100% unceasingly in nuclear joy? And I thought, if that's what I'm made for,
Yeah.
then it is no doubt, no
Yeah.
surprise that I am like a ravenous beast in this world trying to drink up everything I can to get it in
Mm.
me.
Yeah.
And so when I look at who God is, I see Him passionately yearning for us. That he doesn't just, He's not like, I love you, but I don't like you. He's not that kind of
Mm.
God. He's like, He's not even just, I love you like a mate.
Yeah.
He is pursuing us with such intentionality and longing that there is an ache in Him for us. Now, He doesn't ache like we do. We ache because we need. That's our
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
We ache out of deficiency, but God aches out of His nature. And so, in that sense, when I'm running around being like, I need to be filled, I need intimacy, I want to be loved, God is on the other end saying, you have no idea how much I want to satisfy that for you and how much I desire to be loved in that way by you too. And I think it just raises the stakes. It
Yeah.
makes this thing less about moralism and ethics and pleasing and subduing God and more like quenching God's desire for me and
Yeah.
quenching my soul in what it can only be quenched in, which is permanent inness in God.
Yeah.
And I think it's just an incredible metaphysical, exciting, eternal adventure that it opens up for us.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And I just think about all the times where like I'm thirsting for him, but I'm filling it with stuff of this world.
Yeah,
Where he's
yeah,
like, no, like I'm craving you as much as you're craving me, and it's like when you're really thirsty and you take a drink of soda instead of like
Yeah.
water. It's
Yes.
like it
Yes.
satisfies for a second, but it's like it's not actually satisfying.
Yes, man, that's so true. And I think we misdiagnose, and that's really familiar to me because a lot of my health issues are food related, and I spent
Mm,
10 years being misdiagnosed. 10 years,
mm,
doctors saying this and this, and the feeling of being able to, when a doctor said this is what it is, and it working was like, now I know
yeah.
why it hurts. I know
Mm,
how to fix it. And I think sometimes we're like, why do I have this alcohol? Why is it that I always turn to another glass of wine every night? Why
mm,
is it that after I spend time with this person, or when I'm feeling, I just have to launch into anger and vitriol at my spouse? Or
mm.
maybe it's irritability with my children, or maybe it's just Netflix or reels or
Yeah.
shopping or whatever. And when we're finally able to say, because nothing in this world can fall, and this sounds so obvious to a Christian, but yet I don't think we admit this to ourselves. It's
No.
like, I think I'm trying to fix an ache with something created instead of the creator.
Mm,
And we
yeah.
what we want to do in prayer is keep closing that gap. And it's going to take time. You can't just figure this out and do it, right? That's
Yeah.
we've got to break the cycles of disorder and addiction and stuff. But there is a sense for me in which it's like, okay, I need to realize that the fundamental problem with why I keep turning to sugar or wine or work addiction or irritability or whatever is because I'm trying to satisfy myself on cheap goods. How do I then shrink that gap, turn straight to God and say, you know what, God, I don't know how to do this. I feel lonely. I feel angry. I feel rejected. I feel insecure. I feel exhausted. I feel afraid. Can you be this for me? How do I let you in? How do I say yes to your desire? And that's really what I believe at the very heart of it is all of our spiritual formation, all of our life is about just learning to open up and say yes.
That's so good. It sounds like a silly question, but
Mm-hmm.
like we have to get to that spot, right? Like we have to get to that ability to just say yes.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Because it's easy to be like, just say yes, but it's also like, how do you surrender? Like you just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's almost like day by day, like unclenching your fist and
Yep.
opening
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
practice.
Well, there's a few different things, and one of them is a practice. I just started every morning, waking up, first thing, pouring a coffee, sitting in my bed, and saying, "I receive your love." And
Mm,
it felt really weird. And honestly, as a guy, it felt a little bit, there was a little bit of ick to start. I didn't really know what to do with this. It was just kind of like, what am I going to do? Sit and receive love? I don't even know what that means. And I would just sort of imagine waves of God's love pouring over me in the spirit. And I did that morning after morning. And I can honestly say there wasn't probably one day where it suddenly just flooded me and I levitated out of bed and I was like, God loves me.
yeah.
It was more that probably over the process of months and a year, it was like a gentle tide came into my soul and I started to believe it. I started to experience this unceasing
Yeah.
sense of heldness in God. So it did start with that. But then another thing that I really learned to do was to prayer journal and to be really honest with my feelings. God, this is exactly how I feel. I am gonna like just let you know that I'm angry with you, or that like I feel so embarrassed of myself right now the way I reacted to that person or whatever. And as I wrote out my emotions, it's easier to write, I think, your emotions than to just think them.
Yeah.
I began to practice being honest with God.
Mm,
But then the third thing that I've done, this has been really big for me in the last couple of years, has actually been leaning into my pain. And I wrote a couple of chapters in the book. Actually, the end of the book sort of goes into this direction of how do we do this. But one of the chapters is called "Praying the Pain," and
mm,
I just started to kind of try and be almost like an archaeologist or something. Associate. Oh, that's interesting. I reacted that way. That came from a place of pain. What's that pain? So do one thing. One, notice the reaction. Okay, I lashed out at my children just over nothing.
yeah.
B, I sit and say, God, help me to see why I did that. Oh, actually, I started getting irritable 2 days ago when I got this work email, and I just haven't actually
Mm,
really. Oh, that's interesting.
yeah.
Three, what's at the root of that, Holy Spirit? Help me to understand the historical or theological root.
Mm,
Well, when I was a kid, I found I through my identity into what I do. And so when I got this email suggesting that what I was doing wasn't up to scratch, it hit my deepest ache. And then I finished by asking the Holy Spirit to water down there at the roots. Help me to find my identity in you and let go. And when I started doing that and seeing pain as an opportunity and not as a problem, pain and horrible feelings as invitations to experience God, I just experienced rapid growth and freedom in my life. So daily practice of listening, experiencing God's love, learning to process our emotions openly and honestly with Him, and then almost seeing pain as a little kind of telltale opportunity to go back to God, ask what the root is, and ask for healing.
That's so good. Now, because this is a parenting podcast, it's mostly focused on working moms, but how are you modeling this and showing this to your kids? Like, how are you parenting this?
Well, I don't know if other parents feel like this, but I constantly feel like I'm doing a terrible job. So everything I say is coming out of this place of like, this is what I'm aiming for, not exactly what I'm executing with perfection. But, I think for me, the biggest thing has been learning to cuddle my children as much as I can. And it just sounds so obvious, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I think I'm just always thinking, how can I cuddle my kids just until they're completely exhausted from cuddling? Because what I want to do is help them to receive that nonverbal communication. But I think too, like a lot of the time when I'm cuddling them or when they're experiencing that, I say, hey, it's actually okay to feel this way. There is nothing wrong with feeling worried or anxious or nervous. It's a natural response of the body and of your mind to this environment. You're going to be running a finals race and sprinting. Of course you're nervous. Of course you're anxious. You're going to wake up feeling this. The key is just to be honest about it, to accept it, and to move through it. And I think that for me is like, how do I help my children hold their emotions, not deny them, move through them, and then ultimately bring them into that experience of love? And so I'm constantly, at least in this realm, trying to help them to do that, and then to just bring it into that embrace as a way. So it's a little kind of sign, I guess, of what I hope they can learn with God too.
That's so good. And I told you, I reminded you when we started that my oldest is 18 now, and he doesn't want to hug me or cuddle me. But he was laying on the couch the other day, and I don't remember what he was doing. He was just laying on his side, and so I just kind of like went and like laid on top of his side. And he was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, if this is the only kind of cuddling that we can do, because you're not just gonna like let me hold you as like this grown man," I was like, "Then this is what I'll take." And he was like, "Okay." And so he sat there, and he just like, I think he was just scrolling on his phone. So I was just like looking at what he was scrolling, and he was like, "How long are you gonna be like this?" And I was like, "A little bit longer." And he was like, "Okay." It
Cool.
was just kind. So just maybe a little bit of hope that they'll let you cuddle them for as long for longer. So you at
That
least
sounds
got 9 more
amazing.
years. Oh,
That
so
sounds
fun.
amazing. I hope that's true. Hope
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah.
I don't know if
It's a lot
is
of
it, are
fun.
you more likely to get cuddles from your dad or your mum the older you get? How does that work? I feel like mums are more likely to get cuddles than dad as they're older, but is that just
I don't
revealing some kind of
know.
stereotype? I don't know.
Maybe a little bit. I'll say that like yeah, probably. Well, my husband is a very cuddly person, but he probably wouldn't go cuddle them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I
right.
think you're ahead on that.
Okay.
But I'm the one that like will chase down the hugs
Okay.
and the cuddle.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Okay, Strawn, I need to know where can we find your book? How can we connect with you more on this?
Yeah.
And then what? Like, so we get your book, we read it, and what do we do next?
Okay. Well, so the book Thirsting,
Yeah,
you'll find it wherever books
yeah,
are,
yeah.
and there's an Audible and there's an ebook and all that stuff too. Um, And I do also do some prayer books, which
Mm-hmm.
I sell from my website, commonerscommunion.com. And they're like a little bit of a way of, it's very small. It's like a single
Yeah,
page. You can read it in a minute, and it's just intended to kind of launch you into prayer.
yeah,
But I think that what next is, and this is the hard part, really, is theory's great. We all love theory. We all love
yeah,
learning theology. The doing of it is
yeah,
really difficult. And I would just say that if you want to deepen your experience of God, if you want to know Him more, it really is as simple as just little bits of time throughout your day putting it in your phone, setting a reminder, and just opening up and just being available
Yeah.
to God. You can do the big stuff too, like journal with God or have big
Yeah.
prayer times in the morning. But honestly, like you've said so many times, Jeanette, it's just like, actually, we just need to invite him in. We just need to invite
Yeah.
him in as often as we can. And you can work a 60, 70-hour job and still do that. It just
Yeah.
takes practice. So my
Yeah.
recommendation would be, don't overcomplicate it. Don't
Yeah.
try and go big. Just practice saying yes. And sometimes that's all I do. I just turn to God and I say, yes. And I know what that means and he knows what that means. And that's
Yeah.
enough. That's a
Mm.
single word prayer.
Yeah. I love that so much. It reminds me a lot of the practice of Sabbath. Like we don't need to start by
Yeah.
doing a whole 24 hours if that's not what we're accustomed to, but like starting with like
Mm,
an hour and then more and like adding it to. So just being like just like having that like, okay, yes. Like let me have a
yes.
second and then we just build and build and build. And I just think that is exactly the practice that we need.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I mean, we know how to do relationships. We do,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
around people, have fun with them. It's not all about talking 100% of the time. Otherwise marriage would kill us all. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But it is
Mhm.
about being together
Yeah.
consciously. And that's
Yeah.
all it is. It's just learning to do our life, our working, our parenting, our
Yeah.
marriage, our whatever, our admin, conscious of God. And
Yeah.
anybody can do that. Just
Mm.
takes practice.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, I think the takeaway I have from today's conversation is like the awareness of what I'm filling with. Like
Yeah.
if I'm thirsty, am I filling with something that's not actually going to satisfy me? And that's what I'll take from today's conversation.
Yeah. So good. Really good.
Okay, Strawn, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So
Thank you.
fun.